Hey you guys, what's up? In today's video, I'm going to be doing an eyeshadow palette ranking for you guys. So I'm going to be ranking a bunch of new eyeshadow palettes from my least favorite to my favorite. So I hope you guys are all excited about today's video. If you are, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So I have 16 different eyeshadow palettes to rank for you guys. I have been needing to do this for a while and I'm finally just now getting to it. So coming in at number 16, we have the Milani Gilded Getaway palette. This is actually a really pretty palette, but it's just not my favorite. I do really like the color story of the palette, and I was actually pleasantly surprised by the formula of these. Whenever I first got this in the mail, I just thought that I wasn't gonna like it because when I opened it up, I thought it looked very cheap. I just thought that the shadows didn't look very nice. Just because this is at the bottom of my list doesn't mean that I don't like it. It's just my least favorite out of the palettes that I've tried recently. I haven't reached for this since I did my review video on it. This is just not a palette that I really could see myself using. I feel like it is missing some shades. I feel like it needs some lighter shades in this palette. I don't know. I just don't ever see myself reaching for this because I just feel like I can't create looks the way I want to because of how the shades are in this palette. So yeah, I don't dislike this palette. I think the packaging is super cute. The formula is actually better than I thought it was going to be, but it's just my least favorite out of the palettes that I've tried recently. If you guys want to see a review video on any of the palettes that I show in this video, just go to my channel and I probably have a review video for literally every palette that I'm about to show. But yeah, this one comes in at number 16, so at the bottom of my list. Next up, we have one of the BH Cosmetics Remix Dance palettes. This is the 80s palette, and just looking at this palette, it looks like a super fun palette with neon shades, and they're all pretty much matte except for a few just bright colorful shades. I thought that I was going to love this palette, but I ended up not liking it. I just thought that there wasn't enough shades to create a cohesive look with this palette. I felt like some of these shades were patchy, hard to blend. I definitely struggled creating looks with this palette. It's definitely my least favorite out of the Remix Dance palettes, and I normally like BH Cosmetics shadows, and I just didn't like these. I'm wondering if these are pressed pigments, and that's why I didn't like the formula of these, because normally I love BH Cosmetics eyeshadows, but this palette was just definitely a miss for me. I only like a couple of the shades. I feel like some of the lighter shades are good, but then some of these brighter shades are just hard to blend, and I'm just not the biggest fan of this palette, so I would definitely skip this palette if I were you guys and you want to buy one of the Remix Dance palettes. This one is my least favorite out of the three. Coming in at number 14, we have the Too Faced Teddy Bear palette. I thought that I was going to love this palette, but it just left me feeling disappointed. So I posted on TikTok that this palette was a palette that I regretted buying, and people were freaking out why I don't like this palette. It's not a bad palette, it's just not my favorite. I just feel for as expensive as it is, the quality should be better. I just feel Too Faced doesn't have the best quality shadows. They just are a little bit lacking for me, especially for the price. Some of these shimmery shades in here are nice. I just don't find myself reaching for this palette. I feel the color story is just kind of basic. It's not anything new or different. I feel Too Faced, all of their palettes look like this. So it just wasn't anything special for me, and I don't like that it is small because of the price. I feel this is almost as expensive as the chocolate bar palettes, and those are way bigger than this. So that was one thing that was a little bit unexpected for me. When I got this in the mail, I didn't expect it to be so small. If it was a little bit cheaper, I wouldn't mind because I like the small size for traveling, but I don't know, I just never find myself reaching for this, and I definitely regret buying it. I really just bought it for the packaging. I thought it looked really cute. I thought I was gonna like it, and I wanted to review it, so that's why I bought it, but I just didn't end up really liking it that much. It wasn't anything special, so yeah. This one is just not one that I really find myself reaching for, and I am a little bit disappointed in it. Next up, we have one of the new ColourPop neon palettes. This is the Color Vision palette. My last video was actually a review on this collection, and out of the three palettes, I have just found that this one is the hardest to work with. I've been using these since I filmed that video because I wanted to test them out a little bit more, and I think this one is probably my least favorite. I just don't feel these browns blend very easily. I feel they're a little bit patchy when you start to blend them out, and I just feel this palette isn't anything special. I have so many neon pinks in other palettes, so this is just not anything special. As I said, I know a lot of people are disappointed in the neon collection since there is only one neon shade in each of the palettes. This one was just kind of lacking for me. Honestly, the only good shade is the metallic in here because ColourPop has bomb metallic formulas for eyeshadows, but everything else in here was just a total miss for me. So yeah, This one was my least favorite out of that collection. That is why it's lower on the list. My number 12 palette is actually kind of surprising to me because I thought that I was going to love this palette. And it is the Viseart Soleil La Plage palette. Whenever I saw this posted on Instagram before it launched, I thought it looked amazing, but the colors are actually a lot more muted than I was expecting. Viseart has amazing quality eyeshadows, but this palette was just disappointing to me. I just felt like the colors were so muted and just kind of lacking. Like, it's just not what I expected. I feel like it looked so much more like bright and vibrant on Instagram. They probably like upped the saturation. I feel like in real life, like these yellows and other shades like that are just so like boring. I don't know. I just haven't reached for this palette since I reviewed it, which is sad because I thought I was going to love it. Even like this blue shimmery shade, I thought I was going to really like it, but honestly, it looks really muted as well. The quality is definitely here. Like, these blend amazing. I love the quality, but this palette is just kind of boring to me. It was disappointing because I just expected something a little bit more, I guess. So yeah, that is why this one is lower on the list. If you guys want to see like any more like in-depth reviews on these palettes that I'm showing, or like me using them, or like to hear more of my thoughts, make sure to go to my channel and like check out any of my review videos, because so far I have a review video on every palette that I've shown you guys. All right, coming in at number 11, we have the Urban Decay and Prince palette. This is the purple palette. So whenever I first saw this palette, I honestly thought that I wasn't going to like it. Just looking at the colors, like still even now looking at it, like it definitely doesn't catch my eye. But after I did review this palette, I really liked the look that I created with it. Since then, I haven't really reached for this palette though, so that is why it's lower on the list. I think the quality is definitely here with these shadows, and I do think it is a pretty palette, but I don't think it's anything special, which is another reason why it is lower on the list. I know a lot of people are disappointed in the Urban Decay and Prince collection. I don't have like too much of an opinion on the actual collection because Prince was like a little bit before my time, I guess, but I do think this is a pretty palette, but once again, nothing special. I don't see myself reaching for this. I probably won't reach for it that much in the future either. I would definitely not have bought this with my own money. Luckily, I did get sent this because I am on the Urban Decay PR list, but other than that, I definitely wouldn't have bought this palette. I don't know, this one is just not my favorite. It is good quality. I feel like it is missing though more mattes in the palette. There are a lot of shimmer shades in here, so you can't really create that many cohesive looks with this palette alone. So yeah, that is why this palette is lower on the list. Next up, we have another one of the ColourPop Neon palettes. This is the Neon Gaze palette, which is the yellow palette. Whenever I first got these palettes in the mail, honestly, I was expecting to not like this one, but after I used it, I did like it. The mattes, like the darker mattes, were a little bit hard to blend, and I feel like they were a little bit patchy, which is kind of unusual for ColourPop shadows. But after applying the yellow like all over the lid for the look that I created with this palette, make sure to go check out that video if you guys want to see that look. I actually really liked the palette. I thought that it was a pretty look. I feel like the yellow is a fun pop of color. You can put it on the inner corner, all over the lid, on the lower lash line. So I do like this palette, but some of the shades I feel like were just not the best. Like, I feel like this quality is not as good as some of my other ColourPop eyeshadows. And this shade right here, I feel like is such a waste in this palette because these two shades are so similar. This one is just like a little bit darker, and then there are some flecks of glitter in there. I feel like this was such a wasted shadow to put in here. So yeah, that is why this palette's lower on the list, but I was kind of pleasantly surprised with it. I did end up liking it more than I thought that I would. Next, we have the other Urban Decay Prince palette, and I definitely prefer this color story over the purple one. First of all, I think the packaging of this palette is beautiful, and I feel like you can create a lot more looks with this palette versus the purple one. Like, I feel like I could create like a warm toned eye and then a darker smoky eye with this palette. I personally just like this color story better, and then once again, the quality of the shadows in here are really good. I do feel like this palette also needs more matte shades. I hate when palettes have a ton of shimmer shades because then I have to use another palette for like the crease to have like matte shades. I wasn't disappointed in this collection like I thought I was going to be. Like, I thought I wasn't going to like the quality of these palettes, but I actually did like the quality, and then I really did like both looks that I created when I did my review video. So I was pleasantly surprised with these, but this one is just okay. This is also another palette that I probably wouldn't see myself picking up very often in the future, but it is a decent palette. Coming in at number 8, we have another BH Cosmetics Remix Dance palette. This is the 90s palette. I think that this palette has a beautiful color story. Like, I love the shades that they put in here. I feel like you can create so many looks with this palette. Like, I literally look at this palette and I just feel like inspired to create colorful looks with it. And I feel like the shadow quality in this palette versus the 80s palette is just so much better. The colorful shades in here blend super nicely. nicely. I didn't have any issues with any patchiness with this palette. And then the shimmery shades in this palette are beautiful. Like, look at those. I really like this palette a lot, and I definitely recommend it. You can create like a colorful look with this side of the palette, then you can create like a neutral everyday look with the other side. So yeah, I've been really enjoying this palette, and I've been reaching for this one a ton. Next up, we have the new ColourPop Lust for Dusk palette. This is a beautiful palette that has colors in here for like daytime looks. Then you also have some darker shades where you can turn it into a nighttime look as well. If I didn't own so many ColourPop palettes, this one would probably be higher up on my list than it is. I just feel like this palette is a little bit boring. That's why it is lower on the list, even though it is a gorgeous palette. I feel like you can find these shades in so many other palettes. That's why this one is a little bit lower, but honestly, the ColourPop shadow formula is amazing. The mattes in here are super pigmented, blended beautifully, and then these shimmery shades in here, like, are so metallic and just stunning. This is a beautiful palette. You probably don't need it if you have some other ColourPop palettes like the Bare Necessities palette or the Stone Cold Fox palette, but if you don't, you will probably really enjoy this palette. It is a little bit smaller than those palettes, so easier to travel with. You have like cool tone shades, warm tone shades. You can create a bunch of different looks with it. I really like this palette. It's just not one of my favorites because I have so many ColourPop palettes, and it is kind of similar to some other ones that I have, but overall it is a really nice palette. Next up, we have the last ColourPop Neon palette, and this is the Moon Haze palette, which is the coral palette. I knew when I just looked at these palettes, like right after I got them in the mail, that this one was going to be my favorite. I definitely gravitate towards this color story a lot more than the other ones. These shades in here are all amazing. I haven't had any issues blending with these shades. I love the neon coral in here. I've been using this like a ton since I tried this out, and I really do enjoy this one. I feel like it's definitely the best out of the 3 neon palettes. This one has the best quality, and I also feel like you can create like looks for every day that are a little bit more, I don't know, like natural, boring. I don't know how to describe it. And then you have the fun shade in here as well that is a little bit more wearable. So if you're someone who wants to try like a little bit of color, you will probably really like this palette, and the formula is definitely the best in this palette. Man, we have a ton of ColourPop palettes in this ranking video. Next up, we have the Malibu Barbie palette. This palette actually really surprised me. The color story is beautiful. Whenever I reviewed this palette, I was like very surprised with how much I liked it. Before it launched, when I saw the pictures on Instagram, I just wasn't very drawn to this palette, but once I got it in the mail and saw it in real life, I thought it was beautiful. I love the color story. You can create so many looks with this palette. The formula in here is amazing. I haven't had any issues with any of the shades in here, and I think I've used every single one of them. Yeah, I've used every single one of them, and I've been reaching for this palette a lot. This is such a good palette for the summertime. Like, this just screams summer to me, and I've been really enjoying it. I love this blue shade in here. Like, are you serious? Look how pretty that is. So yeah, this has been one of my favorite palettes recently, so that is why it is so high on the list. I've been really enjoying this one. Next up, we have the last BH Cosmetics Remix Dance palette. This is the 2000s palette, and this one is a stunning purple palette. This palette is also another one that is very surprising to me because I expected to like this one the least out of the 3 Remix Dance palettes like before I got it, and this one is my favorite. When I did the review video and did 2 different looks with this palette, they were my favorite looks that I created out of all of the Remix Dance palettes. The formula in here is amazing. The purples actually blend very nicely, and purples can definitely be hard to work with, so I was surprised with how good these are. These shimmer shades in here are just like so metallic and so pretty. I have been loving this palette. I also feel like it is a really versatile palette. You can create so many different looks with it. Whenever I created the 2 looks with this palette for my review video, they didn't even look like they came out of the same palette, and I love when palettes are like that because you can just create so many looks with them. So yeah, I've been really enjoying this one, and I highly recommend it. Coming in at number 3, we have the palette that is on my eyes right now, and it is the ColourPop High Tide palette. First of all, I love this packaging. It is so beautiful. This is a monochromatic palette. This is a beautiful like teal and turquoise palette. It's very like mermaid-esque. I have been really enjoying this palette. I love the looks that I've been creating with it. I thought that some of these shades would be a little bit hard to blend just because they are like a dark teal and turquoise shade, and I've had trouble with shades like this in the past, but these blend beautifully, and the metallics in here are stunning. Like, the shade all over the lid is one of my favorite shades in the palette. It is this one right here in the middle. I have been loving this. You can get this palette at Ulta. I'm not sure if they have it on the ColourPop website, but I picked mine up at Ulta. Coming in at number 2, we have the next monochromatic palette from ColourPop, which is the Fine Feathered palette. This one is a fuchsia palette, and I have been obsessed with this one as well. I have an entire review video where I tested out this palette and the High Tide palette, palette. Make sure you guys go and check that out if you want to see me create a look with this palette as well. But I have been really enjoying this palette too. I never thought that I would like monochromatic palettes as much as I've been liking these. I am like really into pink and berry shades. That is why this one is higher on the list than the teal one, just because I can see myself getting a lot more use out of this palette. Once again, the formula in here is amazing. The shadows are all very consistent. The mattes are all super pigmented, blend beautifully. They're super soft, like they feel so like buttery and soft, and the pigmentation is just so good. And then of course the metallics in here are beautiful as well. So I have been really enjoying these palettes, and the fine feathered packaging is just so pretty. And coming in at number one, my favorite palette that I have tried recently is the ColourPop and Lizzie McGuire palette. This is the What Dreams Are Made Of palette. I never expected to like this palette as much as I do. I just feel like this color story is so fun. Whenever I reviewed this video, I absolutely loved the looks that I was able to create with it. I've used it so much since then, and I've had to like stop myself from using this palette so much because I always want to reach for it. I just feel like it has such a fun color story. I love the greens, and I'm not like super big into greens, and then the purples in here are just so beautiful. Once again, amazing matte formulas. We have this stunning like glitter topper shade. I have been just in love with this palette, and I honestly never expected to like it as much as I do, and I definitely recommend it if you guys are looking for a fun like colorful palette that is on the more affordable side, because ColourPop is affordable but has amazing quality. So yeah, this has been my favorite palette that I have tried recently. So yeah, those are all of the new palettes that I've tried recently. I feel like there were a lot of good ones in this ranking video. Like there aren't that many that I actually like don't like. I've been really enjoying all of the palettes that I've tried out recently. Obviously, I've tried out a ton of ColourPop palettes recently. So yeah, let me know what your favorite palettes have been in the comments down below. I always love to hear what you guys have been loving. So yeah, that is it for today's video. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. Also, make sure you have your notifications turned on, that way you don't miss out on any of my future videos. All you have to do is click the bell next to the subscribe button, and then you'll receive a notification every time I upload a new video. And I will see you guys in my next video. Thank you so much for watching.